Hi everyone and welcome to the Reactor. So just a quick introduction from me and then I'll hand over. So we are the London Reactor here in Microsoft. So today we've got our DevOps Society event, which is led by Dan. So just to introduce myself, I'm Rhiannon Waters and I'm the Program Manager here for the London Reactor. So just a bit of quick code of conduct. Everyone, if you can please just be respectful throughout the event, no interrupting, please be mindful and aware of those that are around you. And just in general, toilets are through there and so are the fire exits. So if there is a fire, please make sure to follow the green man. There's no scheduled fire alarm for today, so if you do hear it, it is the real thing. And just a reminder, no drinks in here other than water. So please, if you have any food or drinks, please take them outside. And just a little bit about the reactor. So does anyone know what the reactor is? No? Okay, that's great, don't worry. So the reactor is basically a technical hub that Microsoft run. We have quite a few of them dotted around the globe, as you can see here. And essentially what they are is they're just spaces for everyone to learn in terms of resources, events and community. So exactly what you guys are doing here today, we have them all reported across the globe. And yeah, so basically we provide events, training and community resources to help startups, developers and students. If you want to find out more about the reactor, feel free to scan the QR code, or you can find us on our website, which is just Microsoft Reactor, as you can see here. So yeah, I'll let Phil scan that for a second. Perfect. And we also have a newsletter, so if you want to know what other events we have coming up, feel free to scan that and keep you up to date. We send one a month, you don't spam your inbox, don't worry. So if you want to find out more of what we're doing, you can just go to our newsletter. So yeah, so I will hand over to Ben. Over here. So yeah, if you just want to take over, do you need?
No, I don't need it.
Okay, perfect.
No, I think it's set up. Let's say you can set yours up.
Yep.
I don't need anything. Hi guys, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Welcome to the first DevOps Society Meetup of 2025. So yeah, we've got an awesome turnout, so thank you guys for coming. Big thank you to Microsoft for not just co-sponsoring, but also for the event space. Really nice space, so thank you guys. And yeah, we've got a lot of new faces, also a lot of old faces that have been coming to our meetups from last year. So a little intro on us. So my name is Vitas, that's Ben sitting down. We're the founders of the DevOps Society, and we run these meetups across London, Manchester, Birmingham, for this reason, so people can collaborate and share ideas and make friends. And alongside the meetup side of things, we then run a DevOps in Cloud recruitment agency. So if anyone needs any advice, any support, they want to find out anything about the market, me and Ben are always happy to help. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to us. Yeah, that's it. I mean, we'll get cracking. We got two really good talks. We got Matteo and Liam after. Yeah, let's get going. Matteo.
Thank you. Right. So, very loaded question, obviously, as a title. Everyone is talking about this. I could not avoid doing that. I'm Matteo. I work at Avanade UK Ireland as a director for software engineering. I also lead the Extension Microsoft Business Group, again in software engineering, but I'm also Microsoft MVP in DevOps. I've been one for 15 years. I saw a fair bit of this stuff going under the bridge. And this is the pressing question of 2025, I reckon, as much as Scrum, big data, DevOps itself, and all the things that came before. Is AI going to change the role of the developer? Now, session is a conversation. All right, I'm going to show you a few things around that I believe they are of interest, and it'll also connect very nicely with Liam's sessions after. But any question, any moment, any time, use your hand, stop me, Matteo, I disagree, I want to say something, whatever, you tell me, all right? Now, very, very quickly, why is AI that big? Besides the hype, we can already see a significant market size for anything AI related. And I had that experience firsthand. I picked up the phone on behalf of a friend. This friend needed some help, we needed to arrange a few things. I said, okay, let's call the bank. you need to open an ISA. That was the reason. You need to open an ISA. This bank offers services on a Saturday. You pick up the phone, you call, you are talking with something. That something is not a person. That something is an AI. And I can tell you for a fact, because then I reached out to people and they confirmed that is an AI. So that kind of thing, besides the chatbots, besides the automated customer service and all of these point-to-point interaction, they are starting to shape our lives. And the money's there. Like in 2034, over $3 trillion in market size. So there's a clear drive to get there. Now, not all AI is equal. There are different types of AI for different experiences. And the answer to this is AI going to change the role of the developer? Yes, but also the corollary is developers are not going anywhere. Let me be absolutely clear. So if you were interested in the answer, that's the answer. You can enjoy food and drinks, all right? But the reality is, knowing that we have all types of AI and two main types of AI, we have to think about developers. And the first one is obviously LLMs, starting with OpenAI, Anthropic. I'm a big fan of Anthropic models because being a developer at heart, I use Claude Sonnet all the time. LLMs are very big rocks in a way, right? If you want a diamond for your ring, you need to carve it out of a much bigger rock. You need to mine it off the ground. Okay, that's probably the closest I can get to as an LLM. An LLM is trained for capabilities that can be embedded in applications. Now, hands up, who has ever used or integrated with an LLM as of today? Just give me a sample size of who's done it. Excellent, roughly 50% of the room. So I assume that 50% of the room has never integrated an application, whatever the application is, with an LLM. I might be wondering, okay, but Matteo, what does it look like in practice? Because I'm a developer, I might be told in the future that I need to look into an LLM. What does it look like? Well, I will show you, because we've got a little bit of time. Yeah, we got a little bit of time, so I will show you. An LLM is nothing more, in this case, OpenAI, right? As OpenAI on Azure, it doesn't change if you go elsewhere. That's the concept. Virtual machines, Kubernetes, functions, storage accounts, you name it, right? You're used to them, you know them. They are resources running your hyperscaler. Those resources will have a well-known facade. An AI service is no different. An LLM is no different. So, for example, you want to integrate with your LLM of choice. The first thing you have to do is to use authentication based on keys. Exactly like something that you can do on a storage account. You can store these keys on a keyboard. You can retrieve them, etc. But then, how do I actually use it? Well, you go endpoints. I'm trying to zoom in a little bit, but for whatever reason, the trackpad is not collaborating. But nothing else. Like this is I think it's a Mini 03. And again, endpoints. You integrate with them. REST API call. You got your key. You can obviously have RBAC on top and all of that. So that goes without saying, right? Enterprise grade setup. But the very basic thing you can do, you got the endpoint, you authenticate, boom, you're in. You start using it. Now, in the real world, you will probably have interaction with other parts of your application, potentially behind the private endpoint, because real world networking means private endpoint, means network injection, means all of those things that we are already familiar with. It is no different. Again, if I were to hide all of this, and I were just to show you the middle part, you might tell me this is a storage account or this is a virtual machine. Nothing different, because you have exactly the same things that you would get with any other Azure resource. Okay, from the virtual networks to the firewall ranges. If you want to have your private endpoint, exactly the same thing. So let's take that away. An LLM in Azure, whatever that is, obviously you will have other stuff on top, okay, which we will see in a moment, but whatever the LLM is, it's just an Azure resource. Or, to take it in an agnostic form, a hyperscaler resource behind the REST API. That's all there is to it. then obviously you have to consume it. You authenticate and you start sending prompts and all these things regarding AI consumption. But from a developer point of view, it's no different than using anything else. A developer might have to deal with the AI Foundry, for example. Liam, don't shoot me down. But it's something where you can go and you can test a few things. I'm a big fan of a playground. I'm a very visual person. I like to play with things. Documentation only goes so far. I want to hit the errors. I want to find out what the errors are. I want to figure that out myself. No better than figuring it out with the playground. Based on that, those things can be integrated in my scripts. I can integrate any prompt required into even the design of my application, because remember, prompts will give you a footprint of things that you can set up the responses with. So very important, but I will not shy away from this, because it is slightly different. If you look under the hood, it's slightly different from anything else that we've done so far, and that's why there is a different way of interfacing it. And then you can go down to the details of fine-tuning a model that allows you to, obviously, I don't want to use region, but it's irrelevant, allows you to fine-tune the model with specific data, with specific prompts, connect to other services and do evaluation of scenarios and all those beautiful things. But in essence, a developer interacts with an LLM as they would with an API. That's the answer. Now, going back to this, as I said, all the usual stuff. Interestingly enough, if you try to get the resource JSON from the portal, you will see nothing different than another Azure resource, because that's what you will get, if you try to extract an AKS cluster. Nothing different. The other type of AI, very broad term, as we know, are assistants. So if I step into my office today, or any other day for that matter, it will not take more than 15 minutes to hear someone say the word Copilot. And I'm sure, I hear some laughter. It's very, very common. Literally, I sit at my desk doing my stuff, whatever, the timesheet or whatever that could be, and you overhear people talking about Copilot, Copilot, Copilot. Why Copilot? Because Microsoft has got like 49 different Copilots. So whenever you talk about Copilot, it means a lot of things, and it's becoming, in jargon, the second noun for assistants. Most importantly, assistants are scoped to specific experiences. So when you build an assistant, you already know that you're working against a well-designed set of use cases. You know that you're going to cover certain requirements, and they're going to be tailored, because the assistants underneath will use certain prompts. The prompts need to be engineered, and so on and so forth. Now, what is, for a developer, the most important Copilot? Or hear it? Come on, someone?
Coding assistant.
Yes, exactly. So, in this case, something like GitHub Copilot, where I'm not going to drain you with the demo of GitHub Copilot, but what you can do with it is either from a comment in the code or by using my beloved Copilot chart. I absolutely love it, because again, very visual person. I can ask GitHub Copilot, can you do something for me? Can you help me with something? And Copilot will say, no, I can't. Because what you're asking me goes against one of the policies. In this case, the policy is prevent suggestions that match public code. So GitHub Copilot is trained against github.com. There are certain things that you can use, certain things that you cannot use. If you end up using GPL code in your code base because Copilot is suggesting it, you could be sued and you could be asked to release the whole of your code base using that piece of code. Not what you want. Also, don't do a Samsung and start using code that comes from, in their case, ChatGPT. In this case, it could be GitHub Copilot, without validating that it's actually the code that you need and that you tailor it. Because otherwise, same problem. So, okay, after I ask Copilot again in a slightly different way, then I'm going to get the results that I want. But this doesn't mean that Copilot does the job for me. And I led a number of Copilot rollouts. I worked on a significant amount of research around developer productivity and Copilots. Forget about the percentages in developer productivity and all of that. The improvement is there. Developers love it, but it doesn't replace anyone. So again, let me be clear. when we hear about certain organizations saying we are not hiring more developers or we are going to replace developers with AI, it's not going to happen. Not with the current technology at the very least, right? Because when you start doing it, and we will see that at the end, when you start doing it, you will see that you can only do so much, for obvious reasons. But the result is that developers are very much necessary. AI is not magic, clearly, but also you need to shape as a developer what you want AI to do for you. So if we go back to the previous example, leave Copilot aside for a minute, but if we go back to LLM as a hyperscaler resource behind an API, who's going to manage the LLMs? There are lifecycle considerations to have there. And who is going to create industrialized processes around LLMs? For example, when an LLM needs to be updated, a fine-tuned LLM needs to be updated because you've got new data that you want to use in order to refine the potential output, also known as LLM ops. Sounds vaguely familiar to me, having done DevOps for something close to 15 years at this point. So these things, they require development. There's no way around it because it's very hard in an enterprise-grade role that you will have a data scientist fiddling in production with your LLM. Your data scientist might work in a development environment, in an experimentation environment, figuring out the fine-tuning. The rest of it should be fully automated as much as you fully automate deployment of infrastructure. And again, integrating with LLMs, securing LLMs, not just as AI guardrail, responsible AI, and all those beautiful things. We heard the example earlier. Who's going to put the private endpoint in front of an LLM? Only a developer can do that. So there are some development practices that very much apply to AI-enabled systems. I'm thinking, for example, when we do, we do TDD, we also do blue-green, let's say, controlled exposure, all of those things. You will be able to replicate this against an LLM. You will be able to do the same things, different technology, different entry points and all of that, but you will be doing that because, again, the example of LLM ops before, you have a fine-tuned model running in production. You need to update it. How do you do that? You validate it in development, fine, in experimentation, fine. That fine-tuned model needs to be promoted. How do you promote it? You don't do it a like-for-like swap because there's always a risk of regression. So you deploy that alongside and you start diverting a certain amount of traffic to the new LLM. Sounds like blue-green to me, if you're familiar with the practice. And then you start moving traffic from one to the other, and eventually you extinguish the original LLM, exactly like blue-green. You were a DevOps engineer yesterday, your company is going full AI today, you're an AI operation engineer now. You can do the same thing, you get probably a salary increase because AI everything, and nice plug for that. And then you continue doing those sort of things because the actual practices on the ground are not different. It's the same conversation that we had in 2006 when AWS came out and the cloud, everything is different. Now it's similar to the grid, much bigger scale. Now, if you're worried about copilots, we talked about that briefly, and we lost connection to the screen. Look. If you're worried about copilots, as I said, they are designed to help and not replace. Because who is going to be the gate between what an LLM produces and what we deploy in production? No matter the amount of fine-tuning that you might get in a model like Claude Sonnet, absolutely brilliant, but I would consider that a co-pilot rather than an autopilot, right? The quality of the prompt is fundamental, otherwise you're going to get crap. If you use it, you need to check that it's using sensible suggestions, especially when it comes to integration with third-party libraries and so on and so forth. Standards. If we define standards, we have to spend a significant amount of time defining prompts that adhere to certain standards. All things that can happen with a developer. So yes, it's true. We have productivity increase. I would say up to 40% in certain scenarios. But you should not be worried. Because if you are a developer, you have 3 stages of evolution, give or take, in your career. If you're a junior developer, you're going to accelerate massively. 40% productivity increase, brilliant. You're going to push out a lot more code, which might be rejected initially, but you might be learning from this code being rejected in pull requests and so on. Which means that your acceleration is going to bring a lot of volume to what you do, and the learning path, the learning curve is going to accelerate significantly. If you are a senior developer, the opposite end of the scale, you're going to save a significant amount of time doing menial stuff, and you can focus that time that you save into stuff that's really interesting. Either be experimentation, either be coaching, either be exploration of new things inside the code base. If you are a, mid-level developer, mid-seniority developer, you will essentially get a bit of both roles. Because you're going to accelerate in certain things. Think about scaffolding, right? If you have a certain way you scaffold your code, and you define that in a prompt, then that prompt is going to take minutes compared to, let's say, half an hour that it might have taken to you before. That time saved is going to be invested in doing what really matters. So you're using your know-how to extend the code base. That's the productivity increase, but it's not going to replace it, right? So developers can focus on what they do best, understanding the business context better, and making sure that they either focus on volume or on quality. Now, next logical step, and Liam is going to talk about a different flavor of this, is agents. Now, agents, next step of the journey of AI. AI, as it started today, does certain things very well in a very tailored fashion with a very specific context. Agents are a bit broader, and I like to call them a headless Copilot. Because at the end of the day, if we have a look, how much time do we have? Yeah, we still have time. If we have a look, you know GitHub Copilot. Now this is the future. It's called Copilot Workspace. Copilot Workspace is the concept of agents brought into the developer space. And I will pick up something, it's a very, very simple example. I'll choose one of our repos, and this is a very easy demo that I use often. Now, I picked up a repo. That repo contains some code. Assuming I'm a new starter, I've got absolutely no idea what that code base does. The first thing that I will be doing usually is either pick up some documentation or grab someone and say, can you please explain to me what the code base is and does? Okay, let's ask about the workspace. What this code base contains and what it does. I'm brainstorming. I am not generating code. I'm asking the agent to do a certain task, very well defined, but it will give me an explanation. Now the explanation is, the code base contains a minimal ASP.NET API, returns all the roles in the current time. That's nothing, right? But the main functionality is in that file. Swagger is implemented for documentation, and you would see that, for example, the reference here in the program CS, maybe it's relevant, but the CS project maybe not that relevant. The solution includes the developer project. Fine, I'll take it. The repository contains file for logging, logging configuration, which is good. There's a GitHub action workflow that's set up to build and deploy the application to Azure Web App, and it targets .NET 8. Now, if you're a developer, you just say 15 minutes. You can start doing those things over your workflow over a day, and if you measure these kind of things over a sprint, you will find that there is a significant increase in productivity, because all of that time that you realize that you have over a sprint, you can start doing not necessarily more, but different, right? So, okay, that's brilliant. Now, if I pick up again the file and I say, okay, from the main logic, how do I add a new route returning BST time zone? Because that could be an extension, right? So it could be an extension of the code. I have a code base that returns the current time with a hello world. I might want to have another route for another minimal API that returns a certain time zone. Again, it's a simple abstract concept. That's it. Oh, that's it. Yeah, that works. So if the current code is essentially this, so the main entry point of the API returns hello world, current time is daytime.now. The new time zone specific entry point, was like BSD, will return the same, a similar message actually, because you see it says current time in BSD is BSD time. It doesn't say hello world, current time is. But this is acceptable. Then I can say, okay, that's fine. I can either accept it and create a pull request, or ask for more, and so on and so forth. Let's assume that I'm fine with that. I'm going to create a pull request. Look, it's contextualized because the agent knows what I'm trying to do. So it creates a new branch name called @BSD_root, and it adds a new route returning the BSD time zone. That's the acceleration that copilots and agents give in the AI space. Now, if you're a developer, those things pile up. I've been there because I still code significantly. And those sort of things are very, very valuable because you can also do documentation generation in Markdown, for example. And you get an agent like this to analyze your code base and return pieces of documentation based on your code, significant acceleration on legacy code bases. Those are the things that are really helpful with. Developers are not going anywhere. As I said at the beginning, they're not going anywhere. Now, you saw pretty much everything. Any question?
Thank you for this presentation.
Well,
That's very good. I think the main issue I really find that it's very complicated to solve with LLM-based development is obviously when you ask questions about an AI, when you ask questions to an AI about a certain code base, obviously all of the services, they have dependencies with each other. So of course it can understand the context of the app it is in, but there's also the context of the little dependencies that all this service surrounds it, and how can in the future or now a machine learning model can answer accurately with all of these dependencies.
That's a brilliant question. And the answer is you can do most of that today if you do things the right way. So if you're a developer and you go your code base and you have access to the dependencies, you can build a context which, when you use GitHub Copilot in your IDE, you will be able to analyze. It's not as accurate because it's an IDE-based context, so it will analyze essentially every piece of code with the same way. The interesting bit comes with, in this case, it's GitHub Enterprise. And I talk about GitHub because I'm very familiar with it, but Amazon Q does something very similar, okay? If you are working with GitHub Copilot Enterprise, there are ways of pointing, there will be ways of pointing the Copilot LLM onto your code and having contextualized answers from there. The initial start of that is the knowledge bases, Copilot knowledge bases, which does it on documentation. The next logical step is code. And you will be able to get, like if you do it today on documentation, you will get fairly accurate answers based on the content, which means that extending it to code is literally a matter of time because all the groundwork is there. So you can do it today, partially. I cannot, I would say this year, if you were to ask me, I would expect an announcement of any sorts, because all the technology is there, the foundation is there, the plumbing is there, so it's a matter of actually putting it together.
So you're referring to also all of the other repositories than
yes.
the one?
Yeah, 100%, because the moment you treat your code base as a whole, as something that you can fine-tune a model on, bearing in mind all the commercial consideration about using a certain version of Git, blah, 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 blah,
Of course.
then you will get the contextual answers that you need. Because you will know that repository A is consuming infrastructure as code from repository B that contains all these standardized modules, let's say, And again, it's probably also documented. The context gets stringed together, and you get the answer that you want. All the groundwork is there already.
Understood. Thanks.
No worries. Anyone else? Slide one down. I see someone from the bottom.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. So my question, I'm just thinking about my background as a tester. From a developer perspective, are LLMs a reliable source of information? Because just thinking about AI in general and the fact that AI models can learn in supervised and unsupervised mode, so assuming LLM, the context of information keeps changing. So how should developers view LLM? So is it a reliable source of information in the first place? And should developers be gravitating towards this as a choice and as a code base for developing product code if that context is subject to change all of the time?
I will quote a very famous American president, always trust but verify. So, I always wanted to do this. So the reality is, the answers might be pertinent, but not necessarily accurate. Because code is code, right? We're talking about code here. Code is code. It could work, given certain constraints, circumstances, etc. It might not be the code that you actually want. We go back 5-10 years, people are going to Stack Overflow, copying a piece of code, and then hammering it into something that works. It's a sort of a similar approach, a bit more institutionalized, a little bit more structured, but it's sort of a similar approach. You can get a head start with an LLM, but you always have to get that down into the context that you're operating in. And if the code comes, for example, using a library that is not supported by what you're trying to do, or simply it's inferring, and it happened to me many times, it's inferring that certain properties on a class, they exist, and they actually don't, because you just written them in a sort of a similar way, but then you don't have the same method and the same properties, then it's down to the developer to understand what to use and where. So it's a source for some acceleration, some ideas, but as I said earlier, developers are going nowhere because you cannot have a fully unattended system, well, a fully built system built by unattended copilots and unattended agents just yet.
So kind of a follow-up to that, do you think going forward as more online content is AI generated, do you start to get like negative feedback into the AI models that will degrade the whole data set?
It's a possibility, but it's also true that we are already starting to move away from LLMs, and we will probably move to a world where we run localized models on our machines. And I had this example on a plane the other day. I was working on something, then I realized I needed to reword this. I need to reword this document, but frankly speaking, it was a document 3 pages long. I really did not want to do it myself, and I realized that Apple Intelligence worked offline because it's a simple request and it runs on machine. Now, I'm thinking developer-focused workflows using technologies like Azure DevOps, to name one, they could host permanent LLMs on these machines because A, you will get computational capacity anyway, B, you're not tied to having a connection or else. The same thing is true the other way around. We could see the evolution of tools that run certain operations on device, because now we literally have the hardware for it, and then certain other operations could be run in the cloud. So I would say today LLMs are the choice. In the future, more specialized language models could come up, and obviously code is an excellent candidate for something like that because it's a well-known corpus with a limited set of keywords. It's not, again, it's a graph database and a mathematical model, right? So you know that doing those kind of permutations is significantly cheaper compared to a language like English or a language like Chinese. Like Chinese is significantly more expensive to compute simply because of the way words are written. So I can see that happening in the future.
Fantastic presentation. I think my question is about the culture. I spent quite a lot of time with the student developer community, and because it's easy for us to say, coming from, there's this saying, don't automate something if you don't know how to manually do it, right? So what is your advice to student developers going into the world with these kind of models that can automate a lot for you and not understanding first principles? What would you say is the advice you would give?
It's the same advice I would have given before LLMs came out. Be curious. So it's very important, and I see that every day because I work with graduates. I'm the executive sponsor for the graduate program, right? So I see that every day. What graduates, I generalize on that, but what the current generation of junior developers do is wildly different than when I was a junior developer, and it's wildly different from the junior developers of 5 years ago, right? So chances are that junior developers today might harness the /explain functionality of GitHub Copilot to actually have an understanding of what they're writing and consuming. The developers of 5 years ago didn't, because they were probably smart enough to pick up from Stack Overflow and other forums, couple something together, brilliant, it works. But then you start asking, okay, but why did you do this and this and that? And they're remaining blank. No, they will probably be smart enough to get an explanation of what the code base does. So advice would be curious and try to understand what you do, regardless, because cobbling together some code is easy, maintaining is obviously harder, and that's what we do day in, day out. Even when you start on a greenfield project, you have to think about maintaining your code. And also it's important because the closer you get with code, then the more familiar we get with the language that you use, and the better you can exploit it in the future. I think you had the hand up before. Sorry about that.
No worries. Okay, thank you for the presentation. Also for the demo. You mentioned that developers they are helping a lot, across Copilot and those kind of things and technology. And we are mentioning things from Stack Overflow like 5-10 years ago. All of that we were, copy past different.
Guilty as charged.
A lot of time. So this is more like a vision question, as a personal question from your expertise in the industry. So how do you see, in the next 3-5 years, these kind of models they're going to be evolutioning, and how they're going to be helping us properly as a developers, as a technologists, or things like that? Because nowadays we have a lot of different things, trending topics like DeepSeek and then those kind of things. So I'd really like to see what's your vision or opinion about that.
From a vision perspective, I actually had a taste indirectly of this. Developers will become way more intertwined with the domain they operate in and the industry that they operate in. That's the concept. The short answer is that, because you're not going to spend 8 hours a day fighting your code. You might spend 6 hours a day fighting your code. The remaining 2 hours, you might actually spend that to understand what the code actually does. What do I mean? If you're working in a certain domain, in a certain context, let's say trading, just to give you a simple example. What trading is essentially a number of transactions back and forth between exchange and various parties. Now, if you were a developer with no aid of artificial intelligence, you would be focused on, I need to implement all the functionalities to make sure that those transactions happen. There's a very solid chance that in that spare time, you might end up asking yourself the question, what are these transactions? What are the processes that regulate the system that I built? And that's what I said earlier, senior developers will have a lot more time to invest in coaching, to invest in actually working with the business context that they operate in. So you will see that developers will specialize in industry. You will see a move away from the generalist SME, technology SME, and on to a more specific, I am a developer in X, Y, and Z industry, because if I work 5 years in each, I will have a very good understanding of trading or high frequency transactions and all of that, and I will be able to reuse that knowledge in the organization that I'm in. So going towards an architectural role, the architects of the next 5 years, I'm expecting them to be way more competent about the domain that they operate in and the industry that they operate in. That's just the natural consequence.
So more business acumen.
Yes, completely. And it's not because the code is getting simpler or the environments are getting simpler, it's simply a consequence of having more time. And whilst we're at it, let's shut down another thing. You don't use developer productivity as an excuse for cutting people, because otherwise, even if you ideally, and that's a conversation that I had multiple times, even if you keep your output flat, you cut cost, air quotes, and you maintain your output, you are already behind all your competitors that might be doing the same but 10% less. Is it worth doing a race to the bottom? Probably not. So that's why I say like when we talk about developer productivity, it's achieving more with the same in terms of headcount and footprint of your development organization, rather than the same with less. Because the moment you have an increase in demand, you're done. You're cooked as an organization. You have to scramble to hire, and it takes time to get someone up to speed. So better to nurture your developers rather than churning them based on demand. And that's a side topic that always goes hand in hand. What's going to happen to developers in this day and age?